Stop Vikings talk. It's Purple Daily on Score North and ScoreNorth.com. Purple Daily, presented by Surly Brewing Company.
And welcome in Purple Daily. It is time for comments from YouTube. Your feedback on the Vikings, read by executive producer and co-host Declan Goff, reacted to by both of us. Brought to you by our friends at Surly Brewing Company and also TCL Television. Enjoy more with TCL TV's football season right around the corner. It's time now to add that TCL to your life to make sure you're viewing the games in the best way possible. And Declan, this is going to be our last comments from YouTube on a Monday for a while because we got new shows coming, very exciting announcements that we have made, I think, in the past week or so. Thor and Jesse are going to host Before I Die, which is, of course, a show based on the fact that before we all die, we hope that the Vikings can win a Super Bowl. You're going to co-host a show with Realistic Randy on Mondays. Is that correct? And
yeah, that'll basically take the place of this show.
Okay, so this show, this is our last, this is our farewell show for a while, but we will have the comment show on the weekend, of course. So without further ado, because this is all about the people who watch and listen to us, we appreciate them. Right. Let's get to their comments.
Let's hit up their comments here. Yeah, the last one we'll do for a little bit here. Of course, yeah, we're expanding our shows, as Judd said, so plenty of other stuff to get to, but there's still a good amount of feedback here. Training camp starts this weekend, Judd. And before I get to our first comment, a quick shout out to our friends at Aquaside and Aquaside.com. I was up at Shell Lake, Wisconsin at the Gals Cabin this weekend. It was an Aquaside lake. It was beautiful. It was 90 degrees. I was able to jump in there, throw the pigskin around with baby brother Joey, right, Judd? I was dropping some dimes and more errant show throws to the right and left and some short throws shallow. But the most important part was when I was in that water, I didn't step in any lake weed or algae because it's an Aquaside lake and they have the Aquaside pellets, which help you remove that lake weed and algae. Go get your Aquaside pellets, clean up your lake home or your pond, whatever it is. Aquaside.com to learn more. Aquaside to remove that lake weed and algae. Let's start with this first comment, though, Judd, from Pablo. Pablo says, I don't think Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell necessarily believe in Kirk Cousins. He's commenting on our episode from Friday that we did where Kwesi went in depth with USA Today and we broke down those questions on 4 Question Friday. And he says, I think they both know they are stuck with Cousins, and so they are going to try to make the best of it. Cousins is a good but not great quarterback. I think everyone knows it, but I can't really figure out why Kwesi is trying to say what Kwesi is trying to say about the quarterback position and, quote, burning it down. What do you think? I think I think I know what Kwesi was trying to say. There was it's the fear of the unknown. You know, when you burn it down, they know what they have in Kirk Cousins. But we'll kind of expand more on that for Pablo's sake to try to figure out what Kwesi was trying to say there.
So Pablo, I think what teams try to do and executives and coaches inevitably at some point in time, it just depends on when they pick their spots. If they are told that things are going to go a certain way and that they have to put a happy face on said move, what they try and do is often then, in a very subtle but effective way, distance themselves from said players or situation. And I think the reality is this. I think part of the reason why Kwesi got this job is because the Wilfs and ownership had a vision that this Vikings team was still very good and that there was no reason they couldn't win. And that, as we've talked about for months now, Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman to a certain degree, but Zimmer was the problem. And I think that when it came down to the payday that they offered Ryan Poles, who went from the Chiefs to the Bears, and I think when it came down to the vision that Poles had, they could not get the guy who I believe was their top choice. And so I think what Kwesi did, and I think he did it in a very interesting way, because it was easily the most frontal thing that he has said since he got here. And he gave the interview to USA Today back in the spring, and now we're days before training camp, and it was released. But I think what he was saying is Kirk Cousins is not the guy. Finding the guy is difficult. We're going to give him a chance, but this is not Brady or Rodgers. I think it's that simple. I think it's that simple. And I don't know that O'Connell that would necessarily have to agree with Kwesi, but it creates a very early, interesting sort of, hold on a second here. I'm not dumb enough to think that this guy is Rodgers, Brady, Mahomes, but I do think that he is a better quarterback than a lot of teams have. I think that's the message.
Let's think of this path in a different way too. So let's say they moved on from Kirk when Kwesi and Kevin O'Connell were hired. Right? They just moved on from Kirk. They drafted let's just call it, for this argument's sake, Kenny Pickett. Okay, let's say the Vikings drafted Kenny Pickett and they made Kenny Pickett their franchise quarterback. And by year 3, Kenny Pickett doesn't turn out to be who he is, right? He might be the savior in Pittsburgh, but it's going to take some time probably for him to know if he's a viable quarterback option. But let's say Kenny Pickett flames out, doesn't get a second contract. It's a Christian Ponder 2.0 situation.
Yep.
Odds are that I would assume that Kwesi or Kevin O'Connell, one of those two, wouldn't survive then the next change in Vikings culture, right? So like if the Kenny Pickett era, if they were overseeing it, one of those two probably doesn't get to see the next iteration, if not both of Vikings football, if Kenny Pickett failed. I think they look at this situation with Kirk and they basically say, all right, you're not going to get a completely, pass-fail grade here. But if things don't live up to expectations and we're still middling 7-9, maybe they make a wild card game, but never really reach the ceiling of being contenders in the NFC, they then can move on from Kirk. And I still think that the Wilfs would give them the benefit of the doubt to start the next era of Vikings football.
I think flat out, Kwesi was told you're keeping Kirk and extend him. I don't think it's his move. I don't think it's his move. I think that's why a guy who was a secondary, an important guy in Cleveland, but certainly was not at the top of lists. Like, he's a very smart dude, but he was not at the top of lists. I think the Wilfs said, we're going to make this work. I think Harbaugh was shown the door as quickly as possible because he probably said, there's a lot of intangibles about Kirk I don't like. Yeah. Exactly. I think the Wilfs, in there are some cases, and it feels like quarterbacks especially sometimes get too involved for what they know about the sport. So yes, I think Kwesi, and look, O'Connell, if you think about it, if the Wilfs basically said Kirk is our guy, O'Connell's the perfect guy, right? He came from the Rams. You've got the Matthew Stafford comparison. He worked with Kirk before. Look, at the end of the day, like you do, no matter what you think of the potential hire, you have to look at why Harbaugh was here for like 12 hours and left, right? Because like if you want to win now, that makes a lot of sense to get a guy who has a shelf life problem, but definitely wins at first. So no, I think Kwesi probably might have said, I'm thinking different at quarterback. And they said, no, you're not. And he said, okay, cool. And then I think he said, you know what? I'm thinking of my guy, Jimmy Harbaugh. I really like Jimmy Harbaugh. And they said, okay, you can bring him here, but probably not. And but again, in his defense, dude, there's 32 of these jobs, right? So like, it's not like, well, screw you, Vikings, I'm going to go take this other job. So I get the game and it's how the game works. But I don't think that there was a lot of thought from these guys about Kirk. I think that there was an expectation that from people above the football people that Kirk would stay. It's that simple. And you know what? I'm curious.
Corey says, I think it's all about how well KOC gets this team to gel. If so, the ceiling is very high. Like all teams, we have weaknesses, but how does KOC attack the other team's shortcoming this season? Scripted plays and offensive adjustments throughout the entire game, stressing 2-minute defense, not giving up points. Time will tell, but I'm going to say that the future looks bright, but it's hard not to get your hopes up. Yeah, it's hard not to get your hopes up. 100%. It's a new era. It's new, even though the team is kind of running it back. The regime around it is still built up enough excitement with the fan base that you can kind of turn over the new leaf.
Well, and I will say this from a fan standpoint. So I am, when push comes to shove, often the guy who likes to tank at times, but reset, right? Like that's me. I think that there's opportunities that are granted in life and sports to reset, and I appreciate when they're taken. But what makes this fun, and make no mistake, and you can say that this is negative, you could say whatever you want, but what makes this fun is there is, starting with Wednesday's practice, there is a pressure that's going to exist that if they had, if they had got rid of Kirk, right, Dex? If they had gotten rid of players, if they had, traded Harrison Smith, that we'd be like, okay, this is not going to be a great year. Jefferson still could be fantastic, but the reality is it's going to take some time. Like the Bears start training camp with zero hope. The Bears are going to suck, right? So what makes this interesting to me is when practice starts, there's pressure. Like no one's going to look at this team and say, if you win 6 games, now will I be absolutely shocked? No, but there's going to be pushback then. So like I like this from an observational standpoint of, as far as I can tell, Kirk Cousins, just to cite one person, has had so many things removed from the equation. He is set up to succeed.
Actually transitions to Purple Punch 420. Sounds like a fun guy. I'd like to hang out with him. His comment here, he says, Kirk's worst enemy is himself. He should be way more confident than he is. He has great arm talent and great weapons. So Judd brought up the point, too, of you removing all of the nuances that have potentially held Kirk back in his Vikings tenure here.
Right.
At the end of the day, if all those are working for Kirk, let's say the offense is indeed doing very well, the defense has turned a corner. Kevin O'Connell looks like he has the tools to be the next great Minnesota Vikings head coach, but Kirk is still Kirk. He melts in a primetime game. He doesn't get the Vikings over in a wild card game. Well, then, as we've kind of alluded to all along, the answer, or the problem, I should say, not the answer, the problem is right there in the mirror if you're number 8. It's yourself. I think if at the end of the day, if everything clicks here, and that's where it's kind of setting up for Kirk to be successful, if it doesn't work and everything else is working around him, well, then it's Kirk. It's a Kirk problem.
Yeah, and guess what? He could totally reverse that, and free of the clutches of Zim, Dex, he could be fantastic.
The clutches.
I mean, he's got look,
like an action movie.
But I mean, he has the ability in that arm. Okay, I get that he's not mobile for the most part. I get that there are certain things that certainly are not strengths, and quite frankly, there's a lot of very successful quarterbacks that aren't really complete players. But when you look at that arm, when you look at his ability to throw the football, there is no reason that he shouldn't win games. And I'm not talking about put up stats. I'm not talking about his fantasy line. I'm talking about win games. There is no reason that given the proper direction, proper attention, and with the skill position players that this team has, that Kirk Cousins should not be tremendously successful. And O'Connell and Kwesi have done everything to put him in a position now to be successful. And so you're exactly right. If it fails, guess what? It's on him. If it succeeds, guess what? We eat crow, and we gladly do it. I'd love to see this team. This team makes a playoff run. Guess what? Purple Daily more popular than ever.
There's a comment about you eating crow that I'm going to save for the end of the show. Literally, that's amazing. So we'll get into that at the end. Also, we have some backup quarterback comments here to get to as well. But Judd, why don't you tell me about the summer of Surly? Because, man, I enjoyed it over the weekend. And you, my God, Judd said, I think, how many liquor store trips did you make on Friday? Did you make more than one? Because you tweeted me Todd the Axeman. You tweeted me a picture from the liquor store. You were making all of your Surly runs.
Here's what we did. Here's what we did on Friday. They're not a sponsor, so I won't mention them.
Oh boy!
But my wife and I met up for a couple of post work for her Surly's. Mm-hmm. Then just a couple, so fine to drive. So then I went to my liquor store down the street, got myself some. That was a Surly Furious night.
Okay.
Saturday had a hankering for the Logic Bomb.
Okay.
So I'm like, and by the way, too, I appreciate all of you that sent us Summer of Surly, show us your cans. That was fantastic. And meanwhile, you Packer fan are in Wisconsin. Okay. You're in Wisconsin drinking what?
I was drinking Surly. And actually, you know what?
Surly? Come on, baby.
I was drinking my Supremes. I was drinking a Pen of the Variety Pack. In fact, I wasn't the only Minnesota Vikings fan or person in Wisconsin. Tommy Kramer was just down the road in Cumberland over the weekend.
Did you go say hi to TK?
I did not say hi to TK. I was in no mood to drive, and I, God willing, I don't think TK probably was either. So I'm not going to go down there. But I wasn't the only one in Wisconsin. Okay, Tommy Kramer was in Wisconsin this weekend. I was in Wisconsin. I think all of us were enjoying some Surly. That's all. That's
awesome.
By the way, I've been telling you guys about Brainerd International Raceway. Moto America is coming this weekend, but also, you can start planning your next month's trip to Brainerd International Raceway because the annual Lucas Oil Nationals is coming to Brainerd International Raceway. It'll blow your mind with drag racing, 330 miles an hour, August 18th to the 21st. So Lucas Oil Nationals at Brainerd International Raceway, camping and ticket information at BIRMN.com, BIRMN.com. All right, some backup QB2 discussion here, Judd. Joshua says the management group will be judged harshly by fans if they appease Kirk by allowing his coach to be the backup, talking about Sean Mannion. If Mond isn't the guy, you trade for a good backup. QB is the most important position on the field, and you need quality out there every week, every single one.
Yes. Okay. I applaud that. I love that. And that comment is dead on accurate. And here's why. Kirk Cousins doesn't get hurt, but he's a quarterback and he's not young. And at some point in time, most guys get hurt. And I'm not talking about 1 or 2 games. I'm talking about an extensive period of time. The pressure on this team to win with the components that they brought back, if Mond's not the guy, Dex, I think you have to go get a veteran. And I'm not saying he's going to be great, but if you decide Mond can't play, that means your 2 backups are guys that can't play. Mannion to me is they've already got 2. He is a 3rd quarterback coach. And that's not a criticism. I'm sure the dude can coach. I'm sure he's going to get a job. So this is not a hot take. I'm picking on guys. But if you decide that Mond is not the number 2 and that he's a bust, I think you have to go explore and get a quarterback. This reminds me now, if Mond can't play, okay? This reminds me of 2016, Sean Hill behind Teddy, and Teddy's leg snaps. And you are screwed. So I love that comment. I think it's dead on accurate. And I don't think that you have the ability to comfortably say, well, Kirk's hurt, Mannion starts for a month. I don't think that you can do that with this roster.
Rusty Rooster Records. No, Rusty Rooster Records says if Mond can't win QB2, you need to send him to the practice squad, cut Sean Mannion, and then sign a real backup. We've talked before about how learning a playbook and learning things in football is not as easy as it is when you make a trade at the MLB trade deadline. Hey, Reds player, go play for the Twins, plug and play. You'll be fine. This exactly. Translates well. Even hockey, it translates well. It's not as simple as it is in football to learn a whole new playbook. But I will say, and I think our buddy Matthew Collar said this before too. He kind of debunked this myth that Sam Bradford stepped in here not knowing a damn thing and put up one of the best games of his life in week 2 against the Packers. Yep. I mean, he knew the playbook for 10 days. 10 days.
Yeah. Yes.
And now he was a pro, former number 1 overall pick. I'm not trying to say that that Sam Bradford probably was maybe one of the anomalies who could do that quickly and pick it up successfully. Yeah. But I think signing someone later before the season as the expected backup, it's going to take him forever. It's going to take him a long time to get acclimated and be ready to play if he had to be called upon.
Well, and I love that point by Collar, and we've discussed this very thing before. Here's what I like about it too. I like when coaches are forced to strip part of the playbook out. Football coaches, and I don't know about O'Connell, but my experience is that they overcomplicate things far too much. But if I get a quarterback late in like a trade, I can't do that. I've got to strip out part of my playbook. Now, I know that you might think, well, my playbook is the greatest thing ever. I'm Lombardi. What are you talking about? Everyone should know all the plays. Actually, that's not necessarily true. And so in that case with Collar, I agree. But I really think that you have a team here where you need to prepare to at least have what I like to call, and Bradford exceeded this by a lot, Declan, but competency, right? A competent quarterback. I think it would be unfair to ask Sean Mannion to run the Vikings for a month. It'd be unfair to him. It'd be unfair to the entire team. Doesn't mean that he's not going to make the team. It doesn't mean that he's not an asset. But can you imagine him playing, 5 games in November?
No, it'd be bad.
It'd be really bad. Well, and then you'd just be punting. Yep. And then you just be punting. So, yes, I think that if you decide Mond is not the guy here after, 2 preseason games, you have to address that spot.
TC on our YouTube comment section. I don't know if he's related to the Bear. Just it just says TC.
The original TC, who I really like.
Yeah, I like me and the original TC. We're really close.
I tweeted with him. I still do tweet with him.
Him and I hung out. I saw him without his mask on one time when I worked the
Phil
bows.
Saw him without his pants on.
Oh, okay. My God.
Just
don't know where that one goes. Just that. There you go. TC says, does anyone realize what the Vikings are good at in the past? Pack up quarterbacks. Cunningham, Farrat, Johnson, Keenum, Jeff George. This regime stinks at finding backup quarterbacks outside of Case Keenum, I should say. But it is kind of funny. Okay. You look at the lore, those backup QBs that have been able to step in when called upon, and the Vikings have done it numerous times. This is where I called for last season, and I still wouldn't rule this out. This is why I said, hey, when the Broncos were going through their QB competition, I said, go make an offer for Drew Lock, and not for Drew Lock to be the
so
starter.
He's saying Spielman, though.
Yeah.
So it's not these guys, it's the previous regime.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that they stink at finding the backups.
Well,
but that's where if you sign someone like Drew Lock or trade or acquire for someone like Lock, it gives you at least a better shot. If he had to start a game in a pinch, I feel a hell of a lot better in Lambeau with Drew Lock than I do with Sean Mannion.
I can't disagree with you. I know exactly what you're saying, and that's my point is, so the Bradfords cost a ton, and I am not calling for that. But yes, a Drew Lock type, and look, is it ideal to have to start the Drew Locks? Probably not, but you feel that you will have competency. I mean, Mannion was lost. Mond was 1,000%, and I actually felt empathy for Kellen Mond, but he was lost. So yes, it's that next tier. The one thing I will say, though, is keep in mind, the backup quarterbacks of yesteryear, the 90s or early 2000s, it's a different ballgame now. Like you used to be stash veteran guys and stuff like that. It feels like everybody sort of gets a shot unless you actually sort of suck, unless you're pretty well paid. So I don't know that it's fair to like bring up George and Cunningham from the Green era Vikings to now. But yes, I don't think that the Sean Hills and Mannions of the world are viable backups at all. I think that there's something in between a Mannion and a Sean Hill, Declan, and a Jeff George and Randall Cunningham back in the day.
Agreed. I mean, I love me some Gus Frerotte. Are you kidding me? Gus Frerotte stepping in, the mob boss, that slick back
Phil
hair.
always mocks me because I always said, how did Gus Frerotte lose his job just because Tavares Jackson had a good game against a Cardinals team in 2008?
Yep.
That had been celebrating all week long. Spent the whole week like drinking. Jackson comes back and absolutely
like 4
plays.
touchdowns.
Yeah, but I mean, the Cardinals
were
playing at like 25% speed, and then poor Chili's like, well, that's my guy. My guy's back. It's like, no, he is not. Gus Frerotte, I was a big fan too.
Big fan. I alluded to this in the middle of the show, but Floyd says, man, if the Vikings win a Super Bowl this year, Judd will get a huge plate of crow, and I cannot wait. Judd will want another piece of the crow, not just the first crow. He'll ask for seconds.
Bring on the crow. Bring on. Are you
crow.
Kidding me? For the Vikings to win a Super Bowl? Now, first of all, keep in mind, I'm 52 now, 53 in November, and this team hasn't been to a Super Bowl since what, the 1976 season, I believe, January of 77. So, I mean, I am scarred. There is no question about that. But if the Vikings and Kirk Cousins win a Super Bowl, are you kidding? Bring it on. I love that thought. That'd be awesome. You know how much fun? I just want him to make a Super Bowl. I just want to see what that's like. Hence the whole before I die thing. So, yes, bring on the crow.
Eat the crow.
I'm cutting it up. I'm eating it.
I'll dip it in a Surly. It'll be the whole thing. Might be Livia approved. I cannot confirm or deny.
Crow's probably not bad for you, right?
Probably not bad. Probably not bad. If you want anyone else to eat crow or eat something else on this YouTube channel, drop us a comment. Hit the subscribe button. Daily Minnesota Vikings Entertainment. We just want to see the Vikings win a Super